"Get out! You are not ours." Her Aunt Abim, a woman whose face was usually etched with the intricate lines of tribal wisdom, now contorted in a mask of cruel rejection. The words, sharp as shards of broken calabash, struck Ifiak like a physical blow, leaving her breathless and trembling under the relentless gaze of the midday sun. Leaving her breathless and trembling under the relentless gaze of the midday sun. This wasn't a scolding for a childish transgression. This was a brutal severing, an unexpected exile into a world she no longer understood. Ifiak clutched the small, intricately carved wooden bird her grandmother had given her, its smooth surface now slick with the sweat of her fear. Just yesterday she had been Ifiak, daughter of Chidi and Amara, cherished, or so she believed, within the warm embrace of their compound. Today she was an outcast, a pariah, her identity stripped away with those venomous words. Her identity stripped away with those venomous words. What had she done? What terrible transgression had she committed to warrant such cold dismissal? The questions clawed at her throat, voiceless in the face of such stark and sudden rejection. In our village, Umwofia lineage is everything. It is the bedrock of our society, the invisible thread that connects us to our ancestors, to the very soul of our land. To be cast out, to have your parentage denied, is akin to being erased from existence itself. The whispers had already begun, insidious tendrils of speculation and judgment that snaked through the community like the harmattan dust. A changeling, some would murmur, their eyes filled with a mixture of fear and fascination. Touched by the mischievous forest spirits, others would claim, their voices hushed with superstitious dread. Ifiak remembered the warmth of her mother's embrace, the strong, comforting presence of her father. Had the laughter around the evening fire, the shared meals of pounded yam and pepper soup, the stories whispered under the moonlight, been nothing more than a cruel charade? The thought was a venom that spread through her veins, poisoning every cherished memory. The thought was a venom that spread through her veins, poisoning every cherished memory. Driven by a desperate need for answers, for a sliver of understanding in this sudden and terrifying upheaval, Ifiak sought out her grandmother Ayemi, whose eyes held the wisdom of generations, whose voice was the soothing balm of tradition. But even Ayemi's gaze held a flicker of unease, her usual comforting touch hesitant. "Child," she began, her voice heavy with unspoken sorrow, "there are things you do not yet understand. Burdens that are not yours to carry." The vagueness of her grandmother's words only deepened Ifiak's anguish. The weight of the unknown pressed down on her, heavier than any physical burden. She was adrift, a small boat tossed about in a stormy sea with no anchor and no guiding star. The familiar landmarks of her life, her home, her family, her place within the community, had vanished, leaving her stranded in a bewildering and hostile landscape. Days bled into weeks. Ifiak found refuge in the shadows, a silent observer of the life that continued around her as if she no longer existed. The other children, once her playmates, now avoided her gaze, their parents' fear a palpable barrier between them. The communal tasks, the vibrant ceremonies that once filled her with a sense of belonging, now seemed distant and mocking. The joyous rhythm of the village drums was a painful reminder of the belonging she had lost. One sweltering afternoon, while fetching water from the village well, Ifiak overheard snippets of hushed conversation. Her Aunt Abim's name was mentioned, along with words like shame, secret, and the river spirit. A cold dread washed over Ifiak. The river spirit was a powerful and often capricious entity in their beliefs, associated with both fertility and danger, with hidden truths and ancient curses. Driven by a desperate need to unravel the mystery that had shattered her life, Ifiak began to observe her aunt more closely. She noticed the haunted look in Ibim's eyes, the way she would sometimes stare into the distance with an expression of deep sorrow and regret. She saw the furtive glances exchanged between Ibim and some of the older women in the village, glances that spoke of shared secrets and unspoken burdens. One evening, as the full moon cast long silver shadows across the village, Ifiak followed her aunt to the edge of the sacred grove, a place where only the elders were permitted to tread. Hidden behind the thick foliage, Ifiak watched as Ibim performed a silent ritual, her movements filled with a desperate sorrow. She poured libations onto the earth, her lips moving in what seemed like a plea for forgiveness. A chilling realization began to dawn in Ifiak's mind. Her rejection, the denial of her parentage, it wasn't about her. It was about something else, something buried deep in the past, a secret that had festered and finally erupted, engulfing her in its poisonous wake. Unbeknownst to Ifiak, a tragedy had unfolded years before her birth, a tragedy that had cast a long shadow over her family. Ibim, in her youth, had fallen in love with a man from a neighboring village, a forbidden union according to the strict customs of Umwofia. Their secret meetings by the moonlit river had resulted in a pregnancy that had brought immense shame and fear to Ibim and her family. Desperate to avoid the wrath of the village elders and the potential for interclan conflict, Ibim's family had concocted a plan. Amara, Ibim's younger sister, would pretend that the child was hers, conceived through a sanctioned union with Chidi. The lie had been carefully constructed and maintained for years, a fragile facade built upon a foundation of fear and secrecy. Ifik was that child. She was the living embodiment of a forbidden love, a secret that Ibim had carried like a heavy stone in her heart. The recent whispers and rumors within the village, fueled by an old rivalry between families, had threatened to expose the truth, pushing Ibim to the desperate act of denial in a misguided attempt to protect everyone involved. The river spirit, often invoked in times of crisis and confession, was central to Ibim's secret anguish. She believed that the spirit knew the truth, that the misfortunes that had occasionally befallen their family were a consequence of their deception. Her ritual in the sacred grove was a desperate plea for absolution, a silent confession offered under the watchful eyes of the ancestors. Ifik, witnessing her aunt's tormented ritual, felt a surge of understanding, a dawning of the truth that resonated deep within her soul. The rejection wasn't a reflection of her worth, it was a desperate act born out of fear and a long-held secret. Torn between anger and a strange sense of empathy, Ifik confronted her grandmother, Imi. This time Imi, seeing the pain and confusion in Ifik's eyes, finally revealed the truth, the story of Ibim's forbidden love, the carefully constructed lie, and the fear that had driven her aunt's cruel words. The revelation was like a thunderclap, shaking the very foundations of Ifik's understanding of her life. The woman she knew as her mother was not her biological mother. Her aunt, the woman who had so brutally rejected her, was her true mother. And the man she knew as her father was indeed her father, bound to her through a web of love and deception. The weight of the lie, the years of pretense, the emotional toll it had taken on everyone, settled heavily upon Ifik. She understood Ibim's fear, the desperation that had led to her harsh words. But the pain of rejection still lingered, a deep wound that would take time to heal. Ifik, armed with the truth, chose a path of courage and understanding. She approached Ibim not with anger but with a quiet strength. She acknowledged the pain of the past, the burden of the secret, and the fear that had driven her actions. The confrontation was difficult, filled with tears and unspoken sorrow. But in the end, a fragile bridge of understanding began to form between mother and daughter. Ibim, finally able to speak the truth aloud, was consumed by remorse for the pain she had inflicted. Ifik, though wounded, found a measure of peace in knowing the truth of her origins. The revelation sent ripples through Umwofia. The whispers and rumors took on a new dimension, evolving from speculation to a complex understanding of the human frailties that had led to the deception. The elders, after much deliberation, acknowledged the complexities of the situation, emphasizing the importance of forgiveness and reconciliation within the community. Ifik's journey was far from over. She had to navigate the complexities of her newfound identity, the shifting dynamics within her family, and the perceptions of the community. But she was no longer adrift. She had found the anchor of truth, and the guiding star of self-awareness. Years later, as Ifik, now a respected young woman in Umwofia, prepared for her own marriage, a traveling storyteller arrived in the village. He carried with him tales from distant lands, and as he spoke, Ifik noticed a familiar glint in his eyes, a way he held himself that sparked a long-dormant memory. One evening, Ifik approached the storyteller privately. She showed him the small, intricately carved wooden bird her grandmother had given her years ago. The storyteller's reaction was immediate and profound. He gasped, his eyes widening in disbelief. "Where did you get this?" he asked, his voice trembling. "This belonged to my brother, Kofi. He carved it himself before he disappeared many years ago." The truth, when it finally emerged, was more shocking and heartbreaking than anyone could have imagined. Ibim's forbidden lover, the father Ifik had never known, was not from a neighboring village as everyone had believed. He was Kofi, a young man from a distant land who had come to Umwofia on a trading mission and had fallen deeply in love with Ibim. Kofi had not abandoned Ibim. He had been the victim of a tragic accident during his journey back home, his disappearance shrouded in mystery. The lie about his origins had been another layer of protection, a way for Ibim's family to further conceal the forbidden nature of their union and the shame it had brought upon them. The wooden bird, a symbol of Kofi's love for Ibim, was the tangible link to Ifiak's true heritage, a heritage that extended beyond the boundaries of Umuofia. It was a poignant reminder of the love that had defied tradition, the tragedy that had shaped her life, and the enduring power of connection that transcended time and distance. Ifiak's story became a powerful testament to the complexities of human relationships, the burdens of secrets, and the resilience of the human spirit. It taught the people of Umuofia that truth, however painful, is ultimately liberating. It highlighted the destructive power of fear and the importance of empathy and understanding. It showed them that rejection, often the sharpest of wounds, can sometimes be born not out of malice, but out of desperation and a misguided attempt to protect. It underscored the enduring bonds of family, however unconventional, and the profound impact of the past on the present. And it whispered a profound truth, that our identities are often more intricate and interconnected than we can ever imagine, woven from threads of love, loss, and the unforeseen twists of fate. The journey to understanding ourselves and our place in the world is rarely linear, often filled with unexpected revelations that challenge our perceptions and reshape our understanding of who we truly are. But through courage, resilience, and a willingness to confront the shadows of the past, we can ultimately find our way towards healing and acceptance. For in the heart of Umuofia, and in the hearts of all who hear her story, Ifiak's journey became a beacon of hope, a reminder that even in the face of profound betrayal and rejection, the human spirit can endure and ultimately find its own unique form of belonging.